Hey, Chaotic Crew, Brian here, and we've got another Magic the Gathering Tarkir Dragonstorm Commander deck to review, upgrade, and give away. This one is the Sultai Arisen Precon, and of course it's all about making sure you get stuff out of the grave, as any Sultai deck likes to do, these days. Don't forget that we are giving away one of these Dragonstorm Precons of your choosing to anywhere in the US. Make sure to comment on each of our upgrade Precon videos. This is going to be the third out of 5. The last one is going to be going out on next Friday. And then a week afterwards, we're going to be going live on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/chaoticcommandermtg. And we'll be giving away one of these precons to someone who's commented on all 5 of these videos. So the comment on this one is, tell me your favorite Sultai card. Who is your favorite card in Sultai? Can be Muldrotha, could be the new Master or the Mothman, could even be Kotis, Sibsig Champion, who is the commander of this deck. Now let's just jump into the review. We're going to be going over the cards in the deck and telling you what the deck wants to do. Then we're going to take 15 cards out, put 15 cards in, and go from there. The commander of the deck, Kotis, Sibsig Champion, Sultai, for a 3/3, and it's a zombie warrior. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard by exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard, in addition to paying its other cost. So it kind of gives you escape in a way. And whenever one or more creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Kotis. So you can kind of go a little bit of a Voltron strategy as well with Kotis. So super fun there, and I think we're gonna get a great deck here. The alternate commander, Teval, the Balanced Scale, 1 in a Sultai for a 4/4 Spirit Dragon, flying. Whenever it attacks, you mill 3 cards, and you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, create a 2/2 Black Zombie Druid creature token. So Teval actually doing the milling, and then getting some lands back, and then making tokens as well. So you can go token strategy, zombie, kindred. You can go into landfall synergies. Lots of things you can do here. They work really well together, I would say. Kotis, is the payoff for, milling your cards and getting, creatures out of your graveyard, essentially making your graveyard an extra hand, and then making himself big, while Teval is sort of feeding the plan, and you get a little bit of value off of it. So that's kind of nice. Diviner of Mist, a new card here. 5 mana for a 4/5 flying dragon. When it attacks, mill 4 cards. You can cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard with mana value 4 or less without paying its mana cost. That spell will be put in your graveyard, exile instead. So very strong card here. It's going to be milling us, and we get to cast spells for free, which can definitely be good, especially when you're in a mill deck. Having a bunch of non-creature spells that make it difficult to get out of the graveyard can be frustrating. So great to have that there to make use of those. Floral Evoker, 3 mana for a 2/3, has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you get a 1/1 counter on it. That's okay, but the real kicker here is green mana, discard a creature card, return a land from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this isn't once per turn. You can, if you have 5 lands in the graveyard and you have 5 up of mana, you can really ramp yourself out here. You also have to have 5 creatures in your hand, right? But your commander is essentially making your graveyard an extra hand, so not the biggest deal to be discarding creature cards. So very strong in here. Steward of the Forest, 4 mana for a 3/3. When it enters, exile the 3 lands from your graveyard. Creatures you control have all activated abilities of all land cards exiled with this creature. So this is super cool. In a way, it makes all your creatures mana dorks, but if you can also exile like an Evolving Wilds or a Fabled Passage, and then all your creatures become fetch lands, which is pretty nice. And I think that can be really strong in certain decks. I don't think it makes a ton of sense here, especially there's a lot of landfall synergies here too, and not a lot of sacrificed lands. If you wanted to go in that strategy, you would need to build a bit more around Steward of the Harvest, but a very cool, very strong new card. Colossal Grave Reaver, 8 mana for a 7/6 Golgari Flying Dragon. Whenever it enters or attacks, you mill 3 cards. So it's feeding the game plan really well. And then whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put one of them onto the battlefield. So really strong here, fueling the grave and also getting a lot of creatures out for free. Just really, really solid. Also great in, you know, the Master, Transcendent, or those kind of decks. I have a Sultai Gigan companion deck, and Colossal Grave Reaver is great there, so I'm definitely going to be picking this card up for sure. Gravecrawler, a reprint, just a great, you know, 1-mana zombie to continuously recast your commander. Is a zombie, so just a free way to get counters on your commander. Amphimutineer, you want this in the graveyard because the Encore is so great. Exile a creature your opponents control. They're going to get 4/3 blue salamanders, but not a big deal because your commander is going to be bigger, right? River Kelpie, pretty interesting card here. 5 mana 3/3. When it or another permanent enters from a graveyard, you draw a card. And then it has, whenever a player casts a spell from a graveyard, draw a card. That's any player, so it could be you or other graveyard decks at the table. And then it has Persist, so this is going to be drawing you cards, which is good in here too. I think, you know, having your graveyard as a hand is nice, but also having your hand as a hand is great too. So being able to draw cards is solid. Doughty Voidwalker, a fantastic reprint, but I don't know how well it works synergistically with the deck. It's a 3/2 shadow. If a card would be put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it with the void counter. Sacrifice this creature, choose an exiled card, and the opponent owns the void counter on it. You may play this turn without paying its mana cost. I think the thought is here, you're going to be sacrificing this creature a lot to cast spells, and you can then recast it with your commander. So a little bit of synergy there, but it's a very strong card, and it's going to get you hated out of a lot of games, especially more casual ones, so just a heads up there. Disciple of Bolas, when it enters, you sacrifice another creature, gain X life and draw X cards where it's that creature's power. And again, the thought is here to sacrifice a creature and then get that creature back with your commander. Junji, a fantastic card. It's a 5-mana dragon, 5/5 flying menace. When it dies, you either have each opponent discard 2 cards and lose 2 life, or you put a non-dragon from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose 2 life. Really great, but I feel like a lot of the time, one of the main cards we want to be getting out of our graveyard is going to be this Colossal Grave Reaver, or maybe even a couple other of the dragons we have. Not be able to get that out is definitely not ideal, so you may want to take this out. Lord of the Forsaken, though, another card that can be great to get out of your graveyard. A 6/6 Flying Trampled Demon, and it has black, sacrifice another creature, target player mills 3 cards, so you can mill yourself. Pay 1 life, add colorless mana, spend it to cast a spell from your graveyard. So very strong with your commander there. Necropolis Fiend is interesting. It's got Delve, so it'll, you know, help cast for itself, and, you know, can be good with your commander. Flying 4/5 and X, tap it, exile X cards from your graveyard. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. I don't know how great this is, if I'm being completely honest. You don't want to be exiling too many cards from your graveyard, so these giant cost Delve cards just aren't really doing it for me. It can be good to have a couple in there, right, because you're going to be filling your graveyard a lot, but you're already exiling a bunch of cards with your commander. Do you really need to be exiling 7 more, right, to really get the most value out of this card? And then exiling even more for its ability? It's just kind of a lot. Noxious Gearhulk, a fantastic removal piece on a stick. Gain you some life too. Ob Nixilis the Fallen, kind of fitting that landfall theme here. Whenever a land enters, you may have target player lose their life. If you do, put 3 moment counters on Ob Nixilis, so this will also get big like your commander will, so very strong there. Tasigur, also a Delve card, and then you can mill 2 cards and get a non-land card of an opponent's choice from your graveyard to your hand. That's okay, but it's, you know, not amazing. Woe Strider can be good. It, you know, escapes itself out. So if your commander is not out, you can sort of get this out itself, and then whenever it enters, you get a goat, and it's a good sacrifice outlet, so solid here. Avenger Zendikar fitting into that sort of land sub thing the deck has going on, and a great creature to at the top end to get out with your commander. Multani also doing really well to, you know, play off this land synergies that this deck has. Shigeki Jukai Visionary is okay. I'm usually not a huge fan of it, but it does, you know, mill stuff. It does get you lands, and you can also channel it to return, you know, some non-legendary cards from your graveyard to your hand. So it does work with the commander, but it's very slow and costs a lot of mana to do all that. Consuming Aberration is fun. Whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals top of the library until they reveal a land card, then puts those cards into the graveyard. So you're milling your opponents, and it's just a big creature. So you can definitely, you know, go a mill strategy where you're milling your opponents out. I think it's just a strong card to get out of your graveyard, or maybe even something you might want to exile itself. Gerard is interesting. Kind of works with that previous card. It 1/1 for each creature card in your graveyard, but you sacrifice another creature and pay, 1 in a Golgari. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. So for creatures like that one, the previous card, Consuming Aberration, you're going to be dealing lots of damage. Lord of Extinction, also a very big power card. Power and toughness equal to the number of cards in all graveyards. So constantly ticking up, something to keep track of. But yeah, just a big beat stick. Marin is interesting. You can get a bunch of experience counters, get cards out of your graveyard, but there's not a ton of Salk outlets in here. So you're really not going to be getting a lot out of Marin in this deck, I think. A good reprint, but you're not really, unless you're building around sacrifice synergies, not amazing. Hedron Crab, though, whenever land you control enters, target player mills 3 cards, so milling yourself for 3 whenever you play a land, and there's extra landfall shenanigans in here, so very strong. Wonder, great card to mill and give all your creatures flying. Resummoning Skeleton, fantastic card to, get out of your graveyard, buff your commander, so very strong there. Stitcher Supplier, fantastic mill engine for 1 mana. Kishless Skimmer, a new card, a 2 mana 2/2 flyer, and whenever a card leaves your graveyard during your turn, you draw a card, but it only happens once. So drawing a new card each turn is very nice for a 2 mana card. Sakura Tribelder, just solid ramp. Satyr Wayfinder, way to get some cards in the graveyard and get a land to your hand. Springbloom Druid gets a land in the graveyard and gets 2 more from your deck, so a bit of ramp and graveyard fuel. Timeless Witness is a great card. Don't know why it has the backside here, but essentially a 4 mana return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Nyx Weaver is just a solid blocker that can, mill 2 cards at the beginning of each upkeep and then return a card from your graveyard to your hand later on in the game. Skull Prophet, it's a mana dork, and you can also mill 2 cards. Milliken is a mana dork that does mill cards, so very good there. On the sorcery side, we got Afterlife from the Loam, a new card here. 8 mana for a sorcery. It has Delve, which you said is okay, but not amazing in this deck. For each player, you choose up to 1 target creature in that player's graveyard. Put those cards on the battlefield under your control. They're zombies, so you essentially can, for essentially 3 mana, get the 3 best creatures out of your opponent's graveyards. So very strong there. Welcome the Dead is an interesting card. 4 mana for a sorcery. Draw 2, then discard a card and lose 2. Create X tapped 2/2 black zombie druids, where X is the number of cards that were put onto your graveyard from your hand or library this turn, and it has flashback for 5 and a black. This is already pretty mana intensive, and this deck doesn't have a ton of ramp other than Tevel and some other stuff. So very mana intensive, and you're gonna have to be discarding or milling anyways. Getting some of those engines on the battlefield can be good, but then you're also only making tapped zombies, and then I don't know, it's a lot. And you do at least draw 2 and discard 1, but I don't know, it's not amazing for me. But Will of the Sultai here, looking a little better. 5 mana for a sorcery, and if you control your commander as you cast it, you can choose both modes. Otherwise, you choose one. Target player mills 3 cards, return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And then you can put X woman counters on target creature, where X is the number of lands you control. It gains trample until end of turn, so very strong there. Life from the Loan is a great reprint here to get some lands from your graveyard to your hand, and it also has Dredge to mill yourself if you don't want to draw instead. Casualties of War is a good way to get rid of a lot of pesky different permanents on the board. Living Death, fantastic board wipe, and since you're filling your graveyard faster than your opponents are probably filling theirs, great here. Necromantic Selection, another good board wipe and gets you a zombie on the battlefield. Treasure Cruise, it's card draw. You can make it cost cheaper. It's okay. Victimize, here's great here. Sacrifice a creature, get 2 creatures from your graveyard, so very strong. Cultivate's good ramp, same with Farseek and Rampant Growth. Back to the enchantments. Tevil's Judgment is a new card. 3 mana for an enchantment. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You draw a card, create a treasure token, create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. So pretty good there to help ramp or draw or make blockers, whatever you need the most. Phyrexian Reclamation, 1 mana, 2 mana to pay 2 life, and return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. That can be neat, especially since we're milling a lot, and maybe we don't want to exile 3 cards. This can get cards out of our graveyard into our hand to, cast it from there. So not terrible. Crawling Sensation, sort of a mill engine. You're milling 2 cards at the beginning of your upkeep, and then when a land is put into your graveyard from anywhere for the first time, you make a 1/1 insect. So could be good, but a little slow. Lethal Scheme, a fantastic reprint here. You're convoking it, tapping some creatures to cast it, and then for each creature that convoked it, that creature connives. and then you can destroy a target creature or planeswalker, so very strong there. Forbidden Alchemy, just, essentially 3 mana to draw 1, select from the top 4 and draw 1, and then it has flashback, so it's okay. You could do better here, but it's alright for now. Grapple the Past, mill some cards, gets you a land or creature from your graveyard to your hand. Harrow is Springbloom Druid, just not on a stick. But the lands do come in untapped, so that's nice there. Tear Asunder is good removal. Grizzly Salvage, similar to Grapple with the Past. Putrefy, also decent removal here. Conduit of Worlds helps cast lands or play lands from the graveyard. Essence Anchor is a new card. Beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1, and you can also use this to make a 2/2 black zombie each of your turns. Arcane Signet, Solid, and Soul Ring is also great. And then 37 lands. Crypt of Agadim is an interesting inclusion here. You don't have a ton of black creatures. There's a decent amount, but don't get me wrong, there's not a ton. So not going to do a lot typically, but nice to have it here. Other than that, Drownyard Temple can return from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, so great call there. And then otherwise, it's just pretty good mana base. You got Myriad Landscape as well. This deck is a little bit over the place. There's some creatures that, care about milling your opponents. There's some creatures that care about milling yourself. I think, the best way to build this, you can go either one of the commanders here. If you're going Tevel, I would probably lean a bit more into the landfall, maybe, or the token strategy. Very solid there. If you're going Kotis, you could lean more into the Voltron side of things, or just bring a bunch of solid creatures that can easily get out of your graveyard or that you want to get out of your graveyard, and kind of just go from there. But let's dive into the upgrade, what we're going to take out and put in. 15 cards out, 15 cards in, starting with Consuming Aberration. This one's interesting. Like I said, you're not really doing a whole lot. It's milling your opponents, and it's just a big creature on a stick, so it doesn't really do a whole lot for you. Daunte Voidwalker, I could consider keeping it, but it's, again, it kind of makes you a target, and I think in these decks you kind of want to make sure that you're laying a bit low until the time is nigh. Disciple of Bolas is good, but it's pretty mana intensive. Sure, you're gaining life and drawing cards, but it's really not amazing. You get left with a 2/1, and you're sacrificing a strong creature to get a big value. I've never really been a huge fan of Disciple of Bolas. Unless you can cheat something back out of your graveyard, it really isn't that amazing. Jared Golgari Lichlord, again, cares about those big, strong creatures. And of course, he gets pretty big himself, but you can't sacrifice himself. So not ideal to keep in here. Lord of Extinction, another big creature that we don't really need, right? They're not really doing a whole lot. Mariner Clonatoth, I also took out just because, like I said, you don't have a ton of sacrifice synergies in here. There's a couple, but there's not a lot. And because of that, sure, when a creature dies, you get an experience counter, but you have to have Marin on the battlefield for that to happen. And there's going to be a lot of times in this Precon where you play Marin and you don't really get a whole lot of value. So I'm taking Marin out of this one, but a very strong card, in a vacuum. Necropolis Fiend, also a massive delve creature, exiling a bunch of other cards. We don't want to exile a ton here because our commander's already exiling a ton of cards, so really kind of hurting us with this one. Shigeki is just too slow and mana intensive for what we're looking for, so I took Shigeki out. Steward of the Harvest, like I said, you kind of need to build around, right? You need more of a land strategy that has a solid land base where you're going to be sacrificing a lot of lands to get the most value out of this, or having unique lands to get the most out of this, but a very cool card nevertheless. I took Tasigur, the Golden Fang, out just because it's another delve card. It's, milling yourself for 2 for 4 mana, and then you get, the worst card out of your graveyard to your hand. Sure, you can kind of politic it, but, most of the time you're going to get the worst card out of your graveyard. Woe Strider I took out. It kind of doesn't do a whole lot. It is a sack outlet, which is nice to scry, but doesn't really do more than that, so not amazing. Welcome to the Dead we also took out just because it's so mana intensive, and you're not getting a whole lot off of this. Sure, we're essentially replacing itself and the card you discard, but you make a 3 or 4 2/2 tapped zombies. Not amazing. Crawling Sensation, also a bit slow. We can put better cards in here that do more things. Phyrexian Reclamation I thought was okay, but you're paying 2 life, and don't really need it, I feel like. With your commander helping you get cards out of your graveyard, don't really need Phyrexian Reclamation here. And then we took out Memorial to Folly. Having a bunch of tap lands isn't ideal, and this one's okay as well, similar to Phyrexian Reclamation. We don't really need what it does. And then paying essentially 4 mana to get that effect instead of just casting a creature from your graveyard is not, you know, it's not great. So we took it out, and going to go to the cards here. We are putting in, so lots of strong ones here. We have got Angel of Suffering, 5 mana for a 5/3 flyer. Damage would be dealt to you, prevent that damage, and mill twice that many cards. So this can go a bit wrong. We don't really have ways to end the game if we're out of our library, but a very cool card here, and makes it so that it gives us a life buffer, right? So very strong there. And then Doc Arlok, amazing to cast these spells from our graveyard. They're going to be casting 2 less to cast, so very strong here in the deck. Gigan, like I said, aka Gyruda, Doom of Depths, is a 6 mana demon, and when it enters the battlefield, each player puts the top 4 cards of the library, including yourself, into the graveyard, and then put a creature card with an even mana value from among those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So if you're able to get one from yourself, great, you get to trigger your commanders, and then and the best part is, if you get a creature from this, not always going to happen, but if you do, your commander will trigger, and you'll get 2/1 counters on it as well. We've got Gravebreaker Lamia, making spells from our graveyard cost 1 less, and then it can also essentially, you know, fix our graveyard for 1 creature. Put a creature in there. Maybe we need fodder to exile for our commander. Maybe we need, you know, a really strong creature to put in there. So I decided to put in Gravebreaker Lamia. Muldrotha's amazing too. Another backup for our commander to help cast permanents from our graveyard and play lands from our graveyard. So very strong. Sin, Spyro's Punishment, a very cool commander. Made a deck tech on this one recently. And whenever it enters or attacks, you exile a permanent from your graveyard at random, then create a tap token that's a copy of it. So we are filling our graveyard a lot, so we're going to be guaranteed getting some permanents here. The thing is, they're not entering from the graveyard or being cast from the graveyard, you're just exiling them and making copies, so it's not super synergistic with your commander per se, but it is another payoff for getting things in your graveyard. Breach the Multiverse is great though, milling 10 cards for each player, and then you get a creature from each player's graveyard. So pretty much it's only going to get 2 counters with Kodos, unfortunately, from this, but very strong card nevertheless. Rise of the Witch King makes everyone sacrifice a creature, and then if you sacrifice a creature, you get to return a permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield, so very strong. Beast Within wasn't in the deck, so I wanted to put it in. We need a lot of removal, so we needed to do that. Broodheart Engine. You can pay your upkeep, surveil 1, and then you can pay 4, tap it, sacrifice the artifact, return a creature or vehicle from your graveyard to the battlefield as a sorcery. So this is going to fill your graveyard cheaply early down. Late game, you can pay 6 mana and tap it to just return something from your graveyard to the battlefield, which for some of our creatures is going to be the same or less than it's actually worth, right? So pretty strong there. And speaking of vehicles that it could get back, Head Shredder, when it attacks, you may mill 2 cards. Whenever one of our lands are put into your graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped. So whenever you are milling those lands, they're just coming right onto the battlefield. Very strong here, and I think works pretty well with the deck. Perpetual Timepiece is sort of a way to save ourselves, right? If we mill ourselves out, how are we going to, you know, win the game? Well, Perpetual Timepiece helps make it so that, you know, we can pay 2, sacrifice it, or exile it, excuse me, shuffle any number of cards from your graveyard into your library, so we can pretty much reset our deck that isn't exiled and go on from there. Last 3 cards we're putting in, they're 3 enchantments. Animate Dead, just a great, you know, reanimation card. Cemetery Tampering, just a better version of this, you know, Crawling Sensation. Instead of only milling 2 cards, we're milling 3 at our upkeep, and it's a May ability, so we don't have to do that if we don't want to, but essentially putting the card to the graveyard for our commander to get a creature out if we want. And then it also has Hideaway, and if you have 20 more cards in your graveyard, after you mill those 3 cards, or after you choose whether you want to or not, you can cast that card for free. So very strong here in the deck. Ripples of Undeath, also really good. You're going to be milling 3 cards at your upkeep, or excuse me, free combat main phase. Then you may pay 1 mana and 3 life if you do put a card from among those cards into your hand. So we typically don't need to do that, but 2 mana to just mill 3 cards every turn is very strong, and I think it's going to do this deck justice. Lots of ways you can go with this deck, especially if you choose to go Tevel instead of Kotis, but I hope you enjoyed the deck tech. Make sure to leave a comment on this video. What's your favorite Sultai card? Could even be, you know, a sorcery, one of the new sorceries from the set, or there's a new uncommon that's really strong and gets you treasures. You could add that to this deck too. But comment on this video and all the other videos. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out the next 2 Precon upgrades. Of course, the last one's coming out next Friday, and then a week after, we're going live on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Chaotic Commander MTG, and we are going to be giving away one of these Precons of your choosing anywhere in the US. Just make sure to comment on all 5 videos. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great one, and I'll be back with Abzan next. Bye.